All right, I hope you enjoyed that last video on gear, and I hope that you're not overwhelmed because listen, it can be overwhelming when there's so many options. What do you choose? We all want the best of the best. Nobody wants anything less than the best, right? So there's so many options. It takes forever to research them. You don't know what you don't know. It's a lot. All right, so in this video, we are going to cover some of these secrets. The first secret that I want to uncover is the secret of advanced lighting. Now, like I mentioned earlier in this series, lighting is one of the most important aspects of getting a good looking image. So right now in this setup, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of lights. I have 4 lights right now, and that's usually common. I got 2 that are colored, and then I have 1 on my face, and then I have 1 that is actually shining that you can see right here on my shoulders, right? So why do I do that? What am I doing? One of the most basic yet most effective lighting techniques is what's called 3-point lighting. And that is basically this. You have a main key light. Then you have a fill light to fill in as much of the shadows as you want. If you want it dramatic, then you don't need it, right? But if you need to brighten it up a little bit, it's a little too dark, you can get a fill light. And then you have a rim light or a hair light. And that is the one that is right behind me that is shining on my shoulders. And see, the reason why you want to do that, and that light is actually probably one of the most important and one of the most overlooked by a lot of people. And that's a secret, okay? That's a hack. Get a rim light. Because what that does is that now shapes me and my outline and creates depth from me and my background. So now the background that's behind me is black as well. But the reason why I stand out from it and the reason why it's more clear is because I have a rim light that is shining on me as well, that is kind of a little behind me, kind of outlining my silhouette. And that is really important. Also too, you can get it where it kind of shines a little bit on the hair and kind of just gives you more of that definition in your hair, especially if you're a woman and you got that beautiful hair, you want to make it pop, get a rim light, which is also what they call a hair light. And the way that you position that light is simply behind you or above you, somewhere kind of above behind. You basically want it to fall on the back side of you. That one is a super hack. Get a rim light, a hair light. Now, your key light, which is going to be your main light, is usually always going to be your brightest light and your biggest light source. Now, you might have seen people that, they got these big, what they call soft boxes. They're big and they're round. Some of them even have some grids on them. Like you're wondering, what is that? Do I need that? Is it square? Is it octagon? Is it oval? Which one for which? Let me tell you this, okay? So the reason why most professionals use those types of lights is because the bigger the light you get, the softer the light source. So if you have a small light, and you can even try it with a small light source and a big light source, the smaller light source is going to create more harsh shadows, whereas the bigger light source is going to make it more soft and it's going to have more of an even fall off is what they call it. So it's going to gradually fall off. Now, one of the best, most available, and most affordable, which is free, light sources that you can get is a window. And this is why it's very common for people to record their videos in front of a window. Now you can't see the window's shining in on you like a light source. You have your camera here, your phone here, and you're talking into your camera and you're using that window as a light source. And like we mentioned earlier with the color temperature, since it's daylight, it creates a nice, beautiful, soft image. And it's a really great way, an affordable way obviously, to get nice lighting. Then you can just add a hair light and you almost could be pretty much done. It pretty much does the whole thing. Windows are a great way to get super soft lighting. That also goes to if you want to take a picture of something or you want to film something else, put it in front of a window. Let that window light come in and light it up, and it's almost always going to look really nice. So what are those grids and those different shapes and sizes? Simply put, one is the light source, right? Some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller. And then also too, the size difference is for different purposes. Sometimes you'll get a long rectangle and it'll be really long, and that might be for lighting the side profile of a person. Or you might get a with an octagon or something like that, right? And those a lot of times are for what they call the catch light. And that is the light that shines in your eye. When you have that little circle in there, it looks really nice. Maybe you've seen people who use the ring lights, which is a very common and affordable light. And I'll talk about those in 1 second. But maybe you've seen those people that use ring lights and they got that weird ring. I call it weird because I don't like it. But they got that weird ring in their eye. Look like an alien or some weird contacts, right? It's distracting to me. So, that's a catch light. That's what that's doing. Now, are ring lights good? Yeah, they are. One of the reasons why they're so good is because of that ring, they create a more wider and softer light. It's not just one light source. So the best way to use that is instead of positioning it directly in front of your face so that you're looking directly into the ring light, position it off to the side and maybe angle it down so that it kind of covers more of the face and you don't get that awkward catch light. They are really good lights, but you got to know how to use them right. I wouldn't recommend looking directly into them like they suggest. They got little mounts on there. You put your phone and it's supposed to light. You can if you want, if you like that kind of thing. I don't really like that kind of thing. I think it's really distracting, but hey, to each his own, right? So that's the reason why the shapes. Now, what are those little grids? Those little grids are actually really important. They call them egg crates for obvious reasons. And I think there's, grids, egg crates. I think they got all kind of names for different stuff. But basically what that does is it creates these grids in the softbox, in that soft lighting, that allows the light to stay focused so it doesn't spill out everywhere. I have a grid currently on mine right now, and that is because I want my light to just focus on my face and on this area. I don't want it spilling all over the background, because if it starts spilling on the background, I start losing the color. It starts, I don't want that. I want to control my light. So that's what those things are for. Do you need them? Not always. It really just depends. Are they good to have? They are. So last thing about the soft boxes is, what is that little white sheet that is usually over there? And even some of them, a lot of them, have a double white sheet where there's a little one and then there's another one that kind of velcros around the softbox. And what that is that is called diffusion. And this is important as well, because there's many ways to diffuse light. You could even get a white sheet from Walmart or from your house and use it as diffusion. Basically what it does is it softens up the light by cutting out the direct harshness of the light, so that when it falls on you, it kind of passes through these sheets and softens up and spreads out. So it kind of pushes it and makes it not so harsh and so direct. It softens the light up. So diffusion is really good. If you're looking at light, you'll see that most video lights come with diffusion. It's a very, very popular thing. I don't use lights without diffusion. I would never, ever, doesn't matter what kind of light it is, just shine a light on somebody without diffusion. I just wouldn't do it, because it's always going to create an ugly looking image. So you want to make sure that you diffuse your light. Going back to that window light thing, that's why it's so nice, is because when it comes to that window, it actually forms a type of diffusion that window kind of creates, that kind of softens up the light. And of course, the light is never usually just shining directly through the window. It's usually bouncing off of different things that you can't see. It's above you, but everything's well lit. So it's not direct light. Whenever you're using direct light, you always got to diffuse it. All right, so now let's talk about another secret to getting a professional looking image. And that is going to be what we call the frame. What I want to point out to you in this frame is a few things, okay? So obviously I got my monitors back there. I got my workstation set up. But if you notice, this is a very symmetrical frame. I got these little things on the wall, these little sound barriers or whatever on the wall. I got my monitors back there. I got my desk right here, forms a line right across here. I got my head that's directly in the center of these two things. Everything is symmetrical, right? It's like what's on this side is on this side. It's flat. It's not, I'm shooting directly straight into the camera, and what is behind me is directly flat. So let me just talk through a little bit why I'm doing that and why I set this frame up and what some of the differences are. So what I'm doing right now is I'm presenting teaching content. I want you to focus on me and what I'm presenting. So the more I can make it symmetrical, which is pleasing to the eye, right? So whenever we see one thing on one side, another thing on the other side, that's more pleasing to the eye. The eye understands, like, oh, I like that. That's good. It matches. It doesn't look weird. If one thing was weird, or off, it might throw you off. For example, which kind of throws me off. If you notice on this side, I got this monitor, which is a little shorter than this monitor, which is a little bigger. It would be really nice if this one was the same, if they were the same on each side. Now they're not, and I got different reasons for that, but it would be nice symmetrically, and that might even have thrown you off. Like, whoa, what's up with that monitor over here? You know what I mean? Why is it so, Because our eye pays attention to things that are symmetric. So it's first and foremost a symmetrical image. In addition to that, what I'm presenting has a big influence on why I framed it this way. Like I said, I'm presenting teaching content that I want you to focus on, that I want you to not get distracted by anything else that's going on in the background, and simply and everything just listen to me and connect with me so that I can give you this information so that you can be successful at mastering video. All right, so that's the reason and the motivation behind the frame. Now, what about shooting into corners? What about shooting different things? How wide should you go? Those are all great questions. I'll get into the angles and the movement and all that kind of stuff next. But for right now, we're just covering the frame, okay? You can shoot into a corner. You can shoot in different scenarios, different ways. Just know this, when you shoot in a corner, or when you shoot and there's a corner or there's an angle, usually that's a little bit more of a creative type of framing. Not necessarily bad, just different things for different scenarios. Is one better than the other? Not really. A lot of it depends on your personality. If you're a teacher, if that's something that you're always teaching and you're always presenting, then you know what? A symmetrical, flat, parallel frame could be a good thing for you. Are you an artist? Are you creative? Do you think outside the box? Well, maybe shooting into a corner or shooting into an angled L-shaped type of frame is good for you. Honestly, there's no right or wrong answer. It doesn't dramatically impact anything, just so that you understand, because a lot of people have that question like, how should I frame it? So when you're framing things too, you want to watch out for what's called headspace. And that is the distance from your head to the top of the frame. You do not want to have too much distance, because then it makes you look really small inside the frame. But you don't want to be so close that it looks like you're constantly like almost at the top of it. You want to make sure that you have enough distance, kind of like how I have now, to where it's not suffocating. It's not like you're too close. You kind of still sitting in right in the center and all that kind of good stuff, right? But you're not almost, kind of in and out of the frame. So you want to watch your headspace. Another great tool for framing is what is called the rule of thirds. Now, you might have seen this. They have them on cell phones. They literally have them on everything that can shoot video, because it's such an important aspect of video for framing. And that is the little grid. There's 2 lines that go this way and 2 lines that go this way. And you'll see that grid. And the idea behind that grid, it's a very, very powerful concept, okay? The idea behind that grid is this. Anything that sits in the intersecting lines, so where those lines cross, anything that sits in those 4 points is considered good framing. So this is why you'll see a lot of times in interviews where the person will be sitting over here and they'll go, this will be the interview. And they'll be like, yeah, so I was, having this situation and this is what had happened and back in 1992 and, this is the case that, right? They're over here on this side because they're more in this intersection. And that's good framing. Anywhere you can put a person in there is going to be good framing. Now, what about the middle? Usually you don't want to be in the middle. Now, that is unless you're presenting content like this, that is teaching, that is, just giving information, speaking to people. It's okay to do it like this. But if I was to shoot an interview or a documentary, I wouldn't put the person in the middle like this. I would put them on one of those intersecting lines. So the rule of thirds is powerful. If you don't have it enabled on your phone, you can go into your phone and you can enable it so it shows up. So that way you have some markers and you have some rules to know how to frame things. Okay, now let's get into angles and movement. Man, these are powerful things, and these are things that I want to at least give you a basic knowledge of how to utilize for your videos, because there's some basic principles with these that are literally going to explode and open up your filmmaking capabilities, and also to give you just an understanding of why you're doing certain things. Okay, it's motivated is how we call it in filmmaking. You want to make sure that everything that you do and everything that you film is motivated. Why are you moving the camera in that way? There's a reason for it. There should be, at least. Some people don't always have a reason, but you should have a reason for it. Why is that camera positioned in that way? So let's first talk about camera angles. All right, so you got eye level. That is basically what you're looking at right now. The camera is pretty much level with my eye. It looks like I'm talking from me to you. It's eye level, okay? That's a standard, normal type of camera angle. A lot of times it's a little boring. A lot of times it's a little plain, but especially for teaching type content where you're just trying to communicate a message, it's great. It works fine. It's not distracting. People are not wondering why they're looking up or looking down. You know, it's a nice, simple, easy to use type of way to frame it. Now, if you want to position yourself as a little bit more of an authority, or you want to position a person as a little bit more authoritative, then what you would want to do is you'd want to shoot up a little bit. And when you shoot up a little bit and your camera's now focused more up, what you're doing is you're now creating them as a position of authority. The viewer is now kind of looking up towards that person, which obviously is like authority, right? It's like, who's this person? Wow, they're really big. A lot of people do this on purpose, especially if they want to convey kind of a certain authority. It has pros and cons, let me tell you this, because sometimes it's not easy for people to relate to people who are super authoritative and super confident. Sometimes the weakness, the struggle, and things like that can cause people to relate a little bit more. Or you can have different types of content where it's like, hey, in this one, I'm going to bring it. And because of that, I'm going to tilt the camera up a little bit and get that nice authoritative angle. The opposite of that is obviously shooting down a little bit. And this is a little less intimidating. This is a little more humble. Now, obviously, there's varying degrees of how much you shoot down. But, generally speaking, let's just say that this is the camera. This is eye level, right? If you kind of shoot up like this, that's about normal. Start shooting up like that, that starts getting abnormal. If you shoot down like this, that's about normal. You start shooting down like this, that's a bit abnormal. Okay, so there's kind of variations. You can do different things, obviously, for different things. You can be creative and all that, but that's usually kind of a general rule. So when you're shooting down at somebody or the camera's facing down, you're coming across a little more humble. You're coming across a little more gentle, a little more relatable, a little more the person has a little bit of kind of like, hey, you're not as intimidating when the angle is fixed down just a little bit. In addition to that, it usually makes the face look a little thinner, okay? For all of you out there that are wanting to look a little thinner, trust me, I know, I feel it. When you shoot down, it does kind of slender out the face a little bit. And so that's why you always see people taking, selfies like that, because that angle kind of hides that chin a little bit and kind of makes the chin a little bit smaller. Now, one of the things that you need to understand about video or even photo is whatever is closest to the frame is going to appear the largest. So as my hand is right here, my hand is the closest to the lens. Sorry, whatever is closest to the lens is going to appear the largest. So my hand right here seems really, really big in comparison to everything else. And the closer it gets, the bigger it gets to everything else. That is because it's close. Now, it even happens subtly even on normal images. So if I put my arm like this, now my arm starts looking bigger than everything else relative to the rest of my body. So this is important, especially if you have maybe, certain things where you're like a little insecure about and you're like, that I got a big shoulder or I got a little arm or whatever it is, right? Like, just know that whatever is closest to the lens is going to appear the biggest. Another common question that comes up a lot is, do you look directly into the camera or do you look slightly off camera, right? What is the difference between shooting content that is directly in the camera and directly off? And here's the biggest thing. When you're shooting directly into the camera, what you're doing is what they call is you're breaking the fourth wall. The fourth wall is that I know there's a viewer watching me and I'm talking to you. This is why you see movies. They never break the fourth wall unless it's a comedy. Usually comedies like Jim Carrey's movie, he breaks the fourth wall sometimes. Like, you never usually want to break the fourth wall because it takes the person out of the story. So if there's acting going on and there's a dramatic scene and they go, you know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like what just happened? Like he just talked to me. Like he was just in the middle of a scene and he just talked to me. So usually like in movies, and you'll notice it now, that they usually never break the fourth wall because that's the wall of imagination for the viewer. They act, even if they look past it, they're just kind of like blazing past it, like it's not even there. They're just like, you know, in teaching content, in content for your business, you're gonna almost always usually break the fourth wall because you're speaking to somebody. That's your audience. You're not in a movie. It's like, hey, I'm getting some information to you. I'm talking to you. I'm educating you. I'm helping you, whatever the case is, right? So usually it's always directly to the camera. There are occasions, and sometimes it is easier, where you can shoot off camera. Matter of fact, I was just shooting a real estate agent just yesterday, and he was having a really hard time speaking into the camera. And I would ask him questions about that topic that we were supposed to address in the video. And off camera, when he was talking to me, he would deliver flawlessly. It was perfect. It was like, wow, that was great. But when it came time to looking at the camera, like it is for a lot of people, it wasn't just him. It's all of a sudden you get all tense. You're like, you start forgetting what you're going to say. You start overanalyzing things. It starts becoming really difficult. And all of a sudden, it's like you forget how to speak English, right? And so I noticed he was doing that a lot. And so I said, listen, how about we do this? I'm going to sit down right here and we're going to have a conversation. And you're going to tell me about these topics. And I simply just prompted him. And it went flawlessly. We had a conversation. It was a little off camera. And we had this conversation and it was great. Now, there was a couple of things why that was so effective. One is because he was interacting with another human. When you're interacting with an inanimate object like a camera, it can be really hard. But when you have a person across from you that has body language, that shows interest, that asks questions, it's a whole nother level of communication. It's a lot easier. It's what we do day in and day out. And obviously, we're not stumbling across our words when we're talking to people. We're just having a conversation, right? It's no big deal. So that's one of the ways that it could be an advantage to you to maybe do that. That type of perspective is a little bit more like kind of like a fly on the wall. So I was talking to him, and the person that is watching it is probably going to think he was speaking to a client, or he was, totally fine as long as the viewer can see both your eyes. Okay, that's really important. So if you do talk off camera, make sure that both your eyes are still in the frame. In other words, you're not like this. Because if you do that, you're losing the connection point. Your eyes are the connection point that the viewer is going to connect with. So even if you're off frame a little bit and somebody can see your two eyes, they're still going to be able to connect with you, and that is one of the most important parts. So you can do that type of content. You could even grab somebody and say, hey, ask me this question. Okay, I wrote them all down. Ask them to me. And then just start recording your content like that until you feel a little more comfortable presenting like this, because it can be a struggle like we discussed. All right, let's talk about camera movement, okay? This one is a big one, but it's really more big if you want to do vlogs or storytelling or cinematic sequences. If you're just creating talking head type content, then you really don't need to worry too much about this. But because it is such an important aspect of mastering video, I wanted to include it so at least you're aware of it. And there might even come times where you need to even record some additional footage that you include in your videos, which is what we call B-roll, and add that into your videos, and this is where it could come in really handy. Obviously, whenever you move the camera, you are creating energy in the frame. What that means is you're creating something dynamic that is causing interest in that frame when it's moving. People are wondering, what am I going to see next? What is in front of me? What is that? They're looking behind, they're looking around. It's creating energy inside of that frame. One of the most common and popularized tools for this is what is called the gimbal. All right, this is a little gimbal here that I got. This is one for your cell phone. You put your little cell phone there and you're off to the races. It comes alive, stabilizes the footage so that you could float around with it and move the camera around. All right, so should you get a gimbal? Depends. You can pretty much do everything without it, but it is a nice tool to have, and they're only getting more affordable. So, hey, if you got the budget, why not? But if it came down to getting a gimbal or a light, I would always go a light or a microphone or anything else that I mentioned before, a tripod. Like the gimbal comes after. But it is an incredibly effective tool for creating videos. And the way that you can move the camera is without jitters, and it's usually a nice soft motion. And so that creates a nice pleasing image that you can use, especially if you're creating B-roll or insert shots or supplementary type of content that adds to the story that's being told, or you want to demonstrate something and you're kind of using that gimbal and it's kind of creating this nice fluid motion. So it is nice. But when are you supposed to move the camera? Here's the thing, once again, Everything has to be motivated, okay? So just understand this. If you're moving it, then you want to show something, you want to reveal something, or you want to follow something, track something. There has to be some sort of motive as to why you're just moving the camera. If you just keep on moving it around, it's going to get really distracting, it's going to get really disorientating, and it's going to be hard to watch. And because they've been so popular, everybody uses them and they don't motivate their shots, so we see them all the time. And sometimes I'll watch videos and I'm like, dang, keep the camera still for a minute. Like, I'm trying to get into the story and you keep on moving it around because you got a gimbal and you're all excited. You just want to move it all around. Stop moving it. Let me see what's going on. You know, there's actually some directors that what they call lock off their shots, which means they put them on a tripod. They don't move them at all. Everything is locked off. They might pan and tilt, which is two types of camera movements. You can pan from side to side, or you can tilt up and down the camera. And so you can do that on a tripod, which is a really, really powerful tool. You can use the pan and tilt for getting those kind of B-roll shots, where you simply point the camera down and you just pan from one side to the other, creates a nice movement in the image and shows whatever it is that you're trying to show. Great, gets the job done. So you don't really need it. But that's kind of the reasoning behind it. And obviously they're super fun and cool to use. And another good aspect or way that you could use a gimbal is if you do vlogging. If you're walking and talking. You know, if you're walking and holding the phone and talking to it, it could become really disorientating with all of those little jitters. So if you have a gimbal and you put your phone on there, you can hold it nice and fluid, and when somebody's watching it, they're like, oh man, this is great. Like, this feels really cool. I see what's going on. It's nice, it's fluid, it's very enjoyable. So that's another option that you might be able to use it for. In the next video, we are going to discuss some quick editing tips for busy professionals. I know we're all busy. We all don't want to become Grammy-nominated video editors. So what do we need to do? How do we need to do it in as quick as possible so that we can get our videos out to the world and start growing our business? We're going to talk about that in the next video.